On this episode of Lez Roll Radio, we ask the question, can you become a BJJ black belt training only no gi or gi? This is Lez Roll Radio, a combat sports podcast. I'm Kelly Shinnicky.
And I'm Andrea Shinnicky. Welcome to the podcast.
So you know how you sometimes have that training partner that goes into training and they're like, I'm not sick, it's just my sinuses.
Yes.
I'm not sick, it's just my asthma.
I mean, kind of.
Yeah. This is like every spring. I have 3 months where I sound gravelly like this and I cough incessantly. And I'll do what I did this week. I'll not go into class for a few days because the coughing's like super bad. And I think I'm going to get over it and like reemerge. And then it goes on and on and on. And I'm like, I have to go back in the gym. I'm not contagious. I just have asthma. And then I go back and I do it again. And I've been doing that for years.
I mean, it's just your cycle.
Yeah. So I don't know.
So if Kelly doesn't sound great, it's because of asthma.
I know. I hate being that person though, because you know that there's always that person that's like, I'm not sick. And then like everyone in the gym catches the thing that they had.
Yeah, but no one's going to catch your asthma.
I mean, I know that, but I'm saying I sound like all of those other people.
Except the baby has your asthma.
Yeah, but I'm pretty sure we both just have
asthma
and are weak. We're a weak people, so it is what it is. So in more interesting news, our friend, coach, and
training partner, and last year's Lez Roll Radio, it's not Lez Roll Radio, I don't even know the name of our camp, Lez Roll Career Grappling Camp instructor. Risser.
Jen.
Oh, right.
She has a first name.
Well,
Risser.
People don't know her by her first name.
You know, I went to law school with her, not that we were like BFFs, but I only called her Jen.
Which
like it was
is
weird when I came to jiu-jitsu and people called her Risser. Yeah.
Because her name's Jen.
She's in my phone as Jen.
But her name's Risser.
Risser.
Okay. Well, Risser got...
Drink every time we say Risser.
Is that every podcast we have?
Probably.
Yes.
But she got her...
black belt.
Yeah, from Rachel Casillas. So congratulations.
Yes, very proud of you.
Very proud. Very proud. She's just going to become our new drinking game, I think. Fernando and Risser.
I mean, I like both, so sounds good to me.
So today's topic has nothing to do with that, though. It's just coincidence that we're talking about black belts. And, you know, as I always like to say, who better than to have judgments about whether or not someone can get their black belt than 2 purple belts?
2 purple belts.
Yeah, exactly. So we're going to talk today about, should you be required to train both gi and no gi to reach black belt, to get promoted and finally get to black belt at some point? I don't know that this is as much of an argument as it used to be.
I honestly don't think it is, just because
the landscape has changed.
Everything's changed. Anything professional is so no-gi heavy these days that people are just mostly doing no-gi, I would say.
Pros, right?
Yeah.
I think women are still doing both because there are less women's opportunities. So maybe they don't tend to specialize as much. But men tend to specialize in one or the other, and pros tend to specialize in no-gi.
As I believe they should.
Yeah.
It's where the money is.
Well, and
you
don't have to any longer do the jiu-jitsu to MMA pipeline. Like, you still can.
Right.
But there's less of a pressure. Like, you can make a living in jiu-jitsu now. It's still hard. But, you know, there is a no-gi circuit for sure.
Yeah. Why do you think people still question whether or not you can get your black belt by just training no-gi versus gi? So like, are no-gi black belts, no-gi only black belts, still black belts in jiu-jitsu?
I think that maybe when I started, I missed some of this, like it being really controversial. Although I would say, like, even just from when I started to now, I would say it's less controversial now. But like I said, I'm not sure that it's as questioned as it once was. But gi is the default, like the original format, the original training modality. Right?
Yeah.
And I think there's also a bias. Like, if you are a black belt, statistically, I'm guessing it's more likely that you primarily trained in the gi at this point in time. Right?
Yeah.
Right. I think that will change over time. And I think that there's maybe a misconception that you have to have full mastery of every single thing to be a black belt. Right?
Yeah.
Including use of the gi.
Right.
Or gi specific techniques. And I think that that's a misconception that I don't think that that's actually an expectation of black belts, that they know every single thing in all of jiu-jitsu at the highest level.
Yeah, I don't think so at all, honestly. So what is the argument then for training both modalities?
Well, a little bit of a spoiler alert, and I know we'll get there. I don't think you have to, but I think a reasonable argument for training both is that you're more well-rounded. And I think that's true, and that's very fair. I also think that there are things in both modalities that benefit the other. So gi, obviously, grip control, I think being a little bit more patient. And of course, if there are any techniques that are unique to the gi, you're certainly not going to learn those or understand those if you're only training no gi, and if that matters to you. No gi, I think movement, wrestling, scrambles are of a greater focus. But I think no-gi is still incredibly technical. I know sometimes people, even really good people, will say like, oh, no-gi, you just kind of like, slip through a guard pass and it's not as technical. I actually don't think that's true at all.
Yeah, I would completely disagree.
I think it's incredibly technical. And you're also going to have some techniques that only work in no-gi, or at least work better, or are only allowed in no-gi, such as heel hooks. Mm-hmm. So if you think about heel hooks, reaping, etc., that's going to be a no-gi thing. I'm not sure of any rule set, major or not, in the gi that allows those. You're thinking really hard too.
Yeah, sorry. I'm thinking really hard. I don't think any rule sets at this point in time in the gi allow for heel hooks at all.
Yeah. So, and also another thing is like many, I think, competitors tend to train both still. Like I said, I think there's a little bit more specialization, but at least initially, most people tend to, at least initially in their training, even if they specialize at some point, train both modalities.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Another thing about no-gi is I think it helps with reaction time and controlling space, sometimes honestly a little bit better than gi. So that could be maintaining frames or closing distance. I felt like I started off as a gi guard player, and I felt like my guard got better and more technical actually when I started training more no-gi. And for a long time, I thought I'm going to be a top player in no-gi and I'm going to be a guard player in gi. Mm-hmm. And there was a point where I'm like, no, I want to be a guard player and I need to not be afraid of no-gi guard. And it was really only through no-gi that I really learned that I was sometimes lazy with framing in the gi and that I wasn't always closing the distance as much as I should. And then I find when I roll with people who really only train in the gi, that is a thing they comment on, is my ability to close space or maintain space. So like both guard retention and then also when I get into dominant positions, my ability to close the distance and to utilize space to my advantage, I guess, in both ways. I think I got that through no-gi, not gi, to be completely honest.
Yeah.
And I say that as someone who like loves gi guard and is like very defensive of it too. But I had some honestly bad habits from one of the cool things about gi guard is your ability to like think. Like it's a little easier to workshop things.
Yeah, I would agree, definitely.
So for me, I still like training in the gi. It's really hard for me. I talk incessantly about the nerve damage that I have and like grips are really hard for me. So it's physically challenging, but I like, if I'm not particularly adept at something, being able to slow it down in the gi a little bit more and like work through it step by step. Whereas in no-gi, I think it's much more unforgiving for that. Mm-hmm. And unless there's just a huge skill difference between me and my partner, I'm probably going to have a harder time workshopping things in a live roll.
Yeah.
Just because of the nature of no-gi.
Yeah, I think it makes sense. Also, in training both, it kind of keeps the doors open as for coaching and competitive opportunities.
Yeah. See, that's interesting because I actually like to say I prefer teaching gi and I prefer training no-gi.
Yeah.
And so because it does exactly that, like we've been in the Friday class I'm teaching going through guard work, specifically gi guard work, and we've been doing it for months.
Yeah.
And while I'm not teaching anything I don't feel comfortable with, like if I'm not comfortable with something, I'm just going to refer out. Right? Or have someone come in and teach or whatever. So I'm only really teaching guards I'm comfortable with that I kind of play, but I'm still learning as I'm going. So it's like a nice way to like stay in touch with the gi. That sounds cheesy. But because it's harder for me to train, it's like teaching it, we're actually switching that class to no gi because people have requested it and I'm kind of sad about it because like I like teaching in the gi more.
Yeah.
Because it kind of strikes that balance for me. So I think that's a good point you made that, you have both doors open, both for competition and coaching. I'm curious, if a black belt is only training in one style, do you think that they're missing some key skills?
Previously, I would have said yes. And I think that I only said that because it was kind of beat into me that you have to train essentially in the gi to like get better at jiu-jitsu. I know someone specifically, a black belt, who said that they could train only in the gi and still be ready to compete no gi whenever the time comes. So they would not train no gi.
Well, they did horrible in their no gi super fights, so that's really funny.
No, I mean, yeah. And the reason being you're not training.
Because they're so different.
It's completely different.
Yeah.
It's not the same. So I would say no. I think the skills are just different.
Well, and then if you think about, like I said, gi specific techniques, it's like, okay, so let's say you're not really good at like loop chokes. Okay, but you probably have some other chokes that are easier to hit in no gi that you're more proficient at. It's like you just trade one thing for another.
Yeah, I mean, the skills can still
like there's
move over.
Yeah,
It's
like there are a
just
ton of
little
things that are
different.
going to align, that are going to be the same, and then there are going to be things that are different, and you're just going to be better at something else potentially.
Yeah. So in talking about that, should no gi be its own path and
Like its own-
different from gi jiu-jitsu?
Like its own sport.
Yeah, I mean, kind of. Just in the way, I don't know.
I just feel like there's too much overlap in terms of like when you have the Venn diagram, there's actually much more in common. So, I said, oh my gosh, they're totally different. We said that a few minutes ago. Yeah, like they are very different, but there's a Venn diagram and it's like that center that overlaps is massive. And then there are things on the fringe that are different for both. So they have more commonalities than they have differences. So I don't know that it makes sense for them to be separate paths. And like I said, I think one can really like inform the other. I mean, I think even if you want to specialize in one, training the other can benefit you in some way. Like you can pick up good habits from the other or like be exposed to different weaknesses.
Yeah, I would agree. So I think something also that no one really talks about and it's not like brought up a lot is why doesn't anyone question gi only training versus no gi only training? Because I feel like it's always like, why are you training no gi? But it's like, why are you training only in the gi?
Yeah, I mean, one is like we talked about this at the beginning, but historically, most black belts got their rank in a gi. It was the standard. It was kind of the default. But, it's the default, and no gi was like seen as an offshoot. So I think that's probably historically why that's been the case. But again, I think that there's a perception that like if you train gi, you're a complete grappler rather than the Venn diagram that we were talking about, where there's a lot of overlap, but for both, there are things that are unique to each modality. Mm-hmm. And I don't think historically people thought of it that way. Like our former colleague who said, I don't ever need to train in no gi because everything I can do in no gi, I can do in gi. So I can just train in the gi and go do a no gi fight. And it never shook out that way.
Never.
I mean, we saw that like it never worked well. And I think it was probably because that person largely trained in the gi and then would get outclassed by no gi submission only type grapplers who were training that modality constantly because there are differences. So I think that that's why historically it's because it's like, well, you can do everything that you can do in a gi and no gi, but you can't do everything in no gi that you can do in gi, like lapels, certain chokes, certain grips.
Yeah.
And so it's always like gi is more. There's more. It's more technical. And I don't think, again, that that's true because I think for all of the things that are a little bit different because of the gi itself, there's an equal number of things, probably roughly
equal
in no gi that are unique to no gi too. Like the quality of your movement, the way you move is different. Again, we talked about like specific submissions, heel hooks, leg entanglements. There are certain guards that are really, really tough to do in gi because of movement and the friction of the gi. There are guards that are easier in gi, because you have the grips. Like it's just, they're different. Again, huge Venn diagram of similarities, but they do have differences. I think that's why historically that's been the case. I think that women's jiu-jitsu really highlights that double standard. Women tend to have to train both because they have to.
Yes, yeah.
In order to
the opportunities are more evenly split between gi and no gi instead of versus
they're
men's.
They're probably still leaning. I think it's more that there's less opportunities. I'm sure that I think the opportunities still lean more no gi even in women's jiu-jitsu, but it's more that they have to take everything that they can get.
Yeah.
Whereas the men have the ability to specialize because there are more opportunities across the board.
Yeah, I would agree. Well, okay. So do you think training both is actually a necessary thing, or is that an outdated belief? Is that something that isn't really the case anymore?
I think you should do what you want to do.
Of course.
And I think especially for most of us who are hobbyists, it kind of doesn't matter. I think you can like one at times, like you can have seasons. Mm-hmm. I mean, like I hated no gi and loved gi, and then I've been on like I would say I've been for most of my jiu-jitsu, much more of a no-gi person, but there was a certain tipping point with that. I've still probably hours-wise trained a lot more in the gi. If you think about the fact that even though I prefer no-gi, most classes I'm in are gi.
I was going to say most schools you go to these days are still predominantly gi.
Even when we've trained at places that have more of a no-gi presence, we've never trained at like a 10th Planet.
Where it's only no-gi.
Yeah,
no.
like we've never trained at that kind of school. So, but I have trained at schools that are basically all gi or mostly, maybe one class a week that's no gi. Best case scenario, it's been 50-50, equitable. But yeah, so I mean, I think that you should do what you want to do. If you want to be a pro, specializing in one or the other is probably ideal. I just think the more you divide your attention among things, if doing so gives you joy,
then do it.
Do it. But doing so it will mean that you're putting fewer hours and less focus into one particular thing. The more you stretch yourself thin, the less you can be intentional and focused on one thing. Right? I mean, it's just that's just reality. So like if you love judo and Muay Thai and jiu-jitsu and boxing and you're training all of those, more power to you. But like you're probably, if you're not hyper focused on one, it's going to take longer. Like it's going to take longer for you to become advanced at any of those individually. Right. Yeah. And I think the same is true for gi and no gi, right?
Yeah,
it's going to be exactly the same. So if you're splitting your time, that's going to be the con. It really should just be what you want. But I do think focusing on one makes a lot more sense if you kind of decide this is what I love, this is what I want to do, focus. But that doesn't mean you have to do it exclusively. And it doesn't mean that you can't change your mind.
Okay. So with that, then kind of the overarching thing of this episode when it comes to getting promoted throughout these sports, throughout jiu-jitsu, for belt promotions, recognition in that case, well, does it matter if you choose one?
I mean, like literally, so jiu-jitsu is a little bit of the Wild West. We don't have one major body organization, and arguably IBJJF is not the predominant no-gi organization anymore.
No.
It just isn't. No, it's no hate. It is for gi though. But even then, it's not the one overarching body. Like you have overarching bodies for judo. That are widely recognized. We don't have that in jiu-jitsu. It's still a little bit of the Wild West, but no major organization requires that you train in one or the other exclusively. And none require that you train gi specifically, right? So you can train only no gi or only gi, and within any organization, you can get promoted to black belt. They don't, IBJJF is the closest to having any rules surrounding promotions, and they don't touch on or discuss modality at all.
Yeah.
Yeah. So no, I do think that there are gyms that may have gym rules or preferences, but the emphasis is that that's a gym preference, not a sport-wide rule. And therefore, you have to make a decision about whether or not a gym's a good fit for you based on that. Yeah, you just have to kind of follow your heart with that, I think. But I think it's silly for any coach to require one
over the other.
Or both, to require any sort of like evenness or not allow that specialization. Because again, you would never, if someone only trained in the gi and never rolled no gi, you would never see that hold them up for promotion. So the opposite shouldn't be true.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
And I think ultimately like the value of your black belt depends on your skill as an athlete, not on the modality. Because again, there are differences between the two. I mean, you could have, a black belt who is a really good top player and you can't get to black belt and have like a trash guard, but like maybe their guard's not as good. How is that any difference than having a no-gi player who maybe is like a good top player, good guard player, but doesn't know, a cross choke because they don't train in the gi?
Right.
Every person, even at black belt, we're not expecting perfection or that they have a complete, even understanding and knowledge and skill and able to execute every technique flawlessly in rolling or in competition. So if that's not an expectation for promotion,
well, yeah.
What's the question?
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, no, I don't think it matters or should.
Okay, yeah, I like that.
All right, so we have a couple listener questions. One came in a while ago, but I knew this episode was coming up, so I held. And another completely unrelated. So first one, what is one misconception people have about jiu-jitsu that you wish you could correct? All right, so we have a couple listener questions. One is related to the topic today, so I kind of held it. It came in a few weeks ago. And the other is unrelated, but a fun one. So first up, that one. What is one misconception people have about jiu-jitsu that you wish you could correct?
So I think when people join jiu-jitsu gyms, affiliations, groups, they feel like they have to have this undying loyalty to that group. And I think it's a big misconception, and people should be able to leave teams and groups if they don't feel like, qualities align, you don't necessarily care for instruction, things like that. And it shouldn't be this big, mean thing that you're not hurting people, you're just not choosing to stay with that group. I just think people take it too personally.
I think that people maybe from the beginning don't recognize, like we were talking about, there being seasons for training one modality over the other. You may just strongly prefer one, but your needs or desires may change over time, and that's fine. You may go back and forth. I mean, you just recently have been like, I want to do more gi.
Yeah.
Like that's just a thing that popped up after you being really into no-gi for years now. I think the same is true for your gym, and there are seasons for things. And we talk about this a lot with cross training. I think that you should train elsewhere. I think that gyms don't stay static over time and people don't stay static. So the people may not be the right fit for you at some point. You may not be the right fit for those people. And you're right. Like people come in and they have this idea that there has to be like undying loyalty, and then it becomes like a second home to them. And then it's really uncomfortable when something's not like working.
Yeah. And then
that's what I see. Like, I think that's what I see as just a peer of people. Mm-hmm. Who, you know, like I'm not a gym owner. I don't do promotions. I teach a class, but I'm not really like a coach. So I kind of like sit on the periphery where like I'm sometimes trusted, but I don't have any like direct influence. So sometimes I just like hear that, and it's like people have a really, really hard time because you're right. Like, I don't know if it's a misconception, but it is a thing, especially with newer people. I think when people get higher up in the rank, they kind of just are like, fuck this isn't working for me if it isn't working for them. But especially with white belts and blue belts, there's just like people let themselves have too much angst about what's going on in the gym with things they can't control. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I agree with you. I don't know that I would have like thought of that as like a misconception, but I think it can be that like you can or should be able to like control those things. I think you can't, and you have to just understand that like you can move on, and and even that moving on doesn't have to be forever.
Yes, yeah.
But there are seasons for things. Yeah, I'm a big believer in that.
Yeah.
Even seasons for jiu-jitsu, it's not even gym specific. Yeah. Like it's okay if you have things going on in your life. It's okay to quit sometimes. Mm-hmm. It's okay to quit forever. I can say that because I don't run a business. I don't need to keep clients, you know? So it's like easy for me to kind of sit as like a neutral party and say those things. I don't want my friends to leave, but I want them to be happy. Yeah. And yeah, it's just sometimes people get stuck in a cycle of complaining about things they can't control rather than like figuring out what is the best fix, even if it's not the perfect fix.
Yeah. You're really good at saying things.
Even with my grovelly voice.
So do you have anything for that?
Misconception. I think sometimes people think that jiu-jitsu is too aggressive for them. And I think jiu-jitsu is incredibly technical, and that you can learn assertiveness and aggressiveness over time. And again, we tend to both like assertive over aggressive. Yeah. But I think you can be even aggressive without harming someone, right? So I think that that's maybe a misconception, is you have to like have some like pent up rage or like anger to do jiu-jitsu. Yeah. For people who are like wanting to start, or maybe like thinking about starting, and they're just like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to choke people. I don't want to hurt people. And it's like,
it comes off as scary too.
It comes off as kind of scary. And it's like, it's very like, it's incredibly technical. It's chess with your body.
It's very controlled.
It's very controlled. And like, if you're rolling with the right people, it's very controlled. And maybe also that it's like too intimate. And I always like try to acknowledge when I have new people that like the things we're asking them to do are incredibly intimate and very weird. So I always say when I'm teaching shrimping and people are like, I'm not getting this, I'm like, if I say this every time, AJ has laughed because she hears me say it. I'm like, if you came in and you knew how to hip escape up and down the mat, I would think you were really weird.
I mean, why would you know that?
Why would you know that? Like, and then people laugh and like, oh yeah, you know, but it's true. Like I make that joke all the time, but like it would be so weird. And the intimacy too, if you haven't done something like jiu-jitsu before, you're not going to be accustomed to that. So I think just like maybe a misconception that like you have to be aggressive, that the intimacy is going to be too much, I think are maybe the biggest things. And it's like the intimacy thing, it really only takes a couple classes for you to not think it's weird.
So we have a second question, and I'm going to read it. So it's, I train at a mostly gi school, but prefer no gi. The culture and location are what keeps me coming in. But I'm having a hard time feeling like I'm not getting enough meaningful rounds in. I also feel pressured, parentheses, some self-pressure and some from my actual coach, unparentheses, to also compete in the gi if I want to progress and get promoted. I'm not sure what my question is, but do you have any suggestions?
I relate to this because we mostly train at a gi school.
Yeah.
The difference is, at least Brissers told me, I don't care if you ever roll another day in the gi. So, like, I think if there's a good culture there, that can be helpful. I also think if there's a balancing act. So, like, if I'm going to a gi class, I'm doing technique in gi out of respect for the fact that it's a gi class, my instructor or whatever. I take off my gi to roll. Mm-hmm. And if that means no one wants to roll with me because they're all rolling in the gi, I can't be mad about that because I went to a gi class and they are there for gi rounds. What I find, and so what happens a lot of times is I sit there by myself. Unless I like just, I'm like, I'll put on the gi and roll. And then I do and I regret it. Like,
Yeah, because then you got
again, and it's not because I just prefer no gi. In my case, it's also some like physical issues. Like I end up hurting myself. Like I can't not grip the gi. I have too much gi guard player in my body, whatever. Like I to protect myself, I need to just not be in a gi, not have my partner in a gi.
Yeah.
Like that's just what I've decided very firmly. I go back and forth on it. I falter with that, but that really should be like my answer. So I relate to this because we have a gym that we very much love the owners.
Yeah.
We very much love the location because it's really close. We very much love the people we train with, but it's gi and we both, or at least me especially, prefer no gi. So it's that. It's, you know, finding partners that will train with you in no gi. It's also going to open mats.
Yeah, I think that's really important.
So that's a big thing. So that may be a school where you get more of your instruction from, and then you may have to get your rounds elsewhere, supplement your training. So go to open mats, you know, find a no-gi gym or a no-gi open mat and go to those and just kind of ensure that you're getting the same amount of rounds in kind of aggregate over the course of a year. You know, sometimes you'll just find certain people that are like in your corner with that. So I've never tried this, but like, I guess I could try hosting a no-gi open mat. I'm sure they'd be down for it. But yeah, I just thought of that and I'm like, oh shit, why don't we do that at our school? But maybe like, you know, if everyone's always just defaulting to gi, maybe you're the person that's like, hey, if I did a no-gi open mat at this time, would anyone come? I know. And with a baby, it's hard for me to go to morning class because she's eating and getting up in the morning. Right at the time I'd have to go to class and have work, you know, too. But I know if I go to morning class that all but maybe like one or two of those people actually prefer no-gi. So I know if I'm having a hard time getting no-gi rounds in, that's a good time, gi or no-gi, to go to a class. So you just kind of figure that out too. Like, you know, what nights are those training partners there that where you can take off your gi and train with them. So that's in terms of like just getting more rounds in. It's take off your gi and offer to roll with people no-gi and understand that they have the ability or the right to like decline or, you know, say yes. And you may just sit there on the sides by yourself. And that happens to me a lot and it's sad, but it is what it is. It's fine. And sometimes it means I roll with like the same few people over and over again too, because I'm wanting to roll no-gi and only a couple people are willing to. So yeah, cross-training is going to be your friend in that case. In terms of the feeling pressure, if it's self-pressure, you got to get over that.
Yeah, you
just got to get over that. If it's pressure from your coach, I think that's bullshit.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because as we've been talking about, one is not more valid than the other. And if you prefer one over the other, you should be able to do that. And you can become a complete grappler training mostly one or the other. I would never say, you know, that any of the black belts that I train with, any of my coaches, any of my friends who have mostly trained gi or mostly trained no-gi are incomplete because they don't train both 50-50 or whatever.
Yeah.
Or compete in both. Mm-hmm. So I think that's bullshit. Maybe you need to find a new school.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, like, I just think that's bullshit. The coach has that right. I just don't agree with it. And it sounds like to the person asking this question, you also don't agree with it. So follow your heart. And again, if you change your mind, that's also a different thing. Because, you know, sometimes that'll happen. People are like, I've actually really been liking like gi guard lately or whatever. Yeah, there's seasons for things. So feel free to change your mind. But I don't know. Do you have any other tips for that? So it's like having a hard time feeling like I'm not getting enough meaningful rounds in, and then the pressure to compete in the gi in order to get promoted.
I mean, no, I just kind of agree with what you've been saying. I think it's bullshit to be pressured into competing one over.
Because you don't have to compete at all.
I mean, people get promoted without ever stepping on a competition mat. So what does it matter?
So why does it matter what affiliation you're in or what competitions you're doing or if you're doing gi or no gi? You don't have to do it at all and you can get promoted. So that's silly.
Yeah, I agree with that.
All right. So questions for each other. When you've been hyper-focused on training one modality, have you noticed a negative impact on the other?
Yes, but I think it's just my dainty fingers get tired, get daintier. And then I go back to the gi and I'm like, my hands hurt so bad. And they do. So, but that's the only thing I can really think of, honestly, is just my hands.
I think for me, it's a challenge because I talk a lot about data and how roles and training is just all data and you have to look at it as objectively as possible. Mm-hmm. But it can be really hard for me in gi sometimes because I do train much more no gi. And so like I find passing a lot harder now in the gi. And so I have to always think, is this because my gi technique is just getting shittier?
Yeah.
I mean, truly. Or is it because I'm having a hard time physically breaking grips?
Yeah.
And the answer is probably both, but like it's helpful to be able to understand like the percentage, because if it's really like my passing's like just gone to shit because I'm not training in gi, there's some like technical things I can work on there. But if it's mostly my grips, then maybe that's not the best use of my energy. So like I think about those things, and it's like hard to always objectively evaluate that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Especially if you have any sort of like physical injury or infirmness. I'm sure it's the same thing with your hip. You're sometimes probably like, is this like, you know, let's say you're in guard, like a guard retention issue, like a technical issue, or is this a mobility issue with my hip?
Yeah.
Right. I mean, like we all have those sort of things. So the answer is like, it's usually a little bit of both. And so figuring out kind of like what percentage of both, I find that the hardest when I'm really hyper focused on no gi. And as I have been, that I really have a hard time in general enrolling in the gi. I tend to sweep and come on top a lot more because it's like I have all the time in the world to like set up my sweep because I have gi grips, and then my fingers hurt and I'm sad about it. But if someone pulls on me in gi, honestly, it's like the best way to sweep me.
You're living the dream.
No.
Oh, sorry.
No, they're living the dream.
They're living the dream. That's
God,
what I meant.
No, because like I can't break your grips. Like I'm weak and infirm, so I'm probably gonna get swept, and I'm probably gonna see it coming, feel really demeaned about it and sad. But it's okay. It's a good. I'll work on escapes. It's a good learning opportunity.
There you go.
So I just try to have a good attitude about it. It's hard for your ego.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard because it's like you're like, shit, that's like I just can't break those grips. Like I can't physically do that. But then you don't want to say that because you also don't want to sound like you're making excuses or like being demeaning towards your partner who hit something.
Yeah, I agree.
So you just kind of have to eat it, right?
Yes.
Move
Yeah.
on. But for sure, definitely can have negative impact on the other.
So my question is, why do you prefer one more modality over the other when you weren't injured? So like when you weren't having your hand issues and such.
Yeah, because now I just feel like it's necessary. I didn't like no gi early on because I felt like the only way I could keep someone in guard was to like grab the gi and hold on. And for me, learning how to open up an attack was hard.
Yeah.
And that was a challenge. So, and I think that's a challenge for probably a lot of white belts. So really, really early on, that was why I hated no gi, because I didn't have anything to cling to. And sometimes closing the distance to get to like, you know, a closed guard can be hard, especially off of a pull in a competition setting. So, and I wasn't really a closed guard player either in gi. So it was just kind of like sucked. I started really loving it because, and this is my hot take that I know a lot of people won't agree with, I actually think it's more technical. I think you have less crutches to rely on. And because things are moving at a faster pace, you have to think quicker, be more precise, and it's less forgiving of errors. So it's why I mentioned I actually like teaching in gi a little bit more, and I like workshopping things in gi a little bit more because I can slow it down. And then I think the uncomfortability of no gi, the pace, just getting my ass kicked more has been good for me. So like I hated it at first because I was getting my ass kicked, and then I came to appreciate it because I was getting my ass kicked. And I felt like I feel like I have seen more growth in no gi. Like my guard has gotten better, gi and no gi, by training no gi. My ability to attack, my sweeps, like just passing, I think has been largely informed by no gi.
Yeah.
Personally. So that's why I prefer it independent of my little infirm arms. You know, when you can't like really like grip things.
Yeah, it makes things difficult.
It's hard. So like, you know, framing with an arm is a lot easier than gripping and like holding on. And yeah, and some of it's a me problem. Like I could probably do some of that if I wouldn't death grip, but I'm going to death grip.
Yeah. Yeah.
How about you?
I would say I think I prefer no gi in some aspects because of speed. I feel like I'm fast. So, which is also not great for a lot of my jiu-jitsu because I need to slow down a little bit.
Settle.
Yeah, to
You
settle.
and Salma.
Yeah, we're two birds of a feather in
You're
that.
quick.
And our rounds are literally just us constantly moving.
You're just scrambling the
moving.
entire time.
So yeah, it's.
I was kind of like doing something live with Jacob, my coach, the other day, and he was like, "Are you wrestling me?" And I'm like, "I've been rolling with Andrea." Like, but he was laughing, like he was making fun of me. But that's a round with Andrea. It's like you're just fucking ground wrestling the whole time, and then you put you and Salma together, and it is insane.
Yeah, just constant movement.
Yeah.
So I like that because it feels like a crazy good workout.
It's just fun.
It's fun, yeah. So that's my answer for that.
But you've been kind of into gi lately, so what is the thing that you prefer about it? I'm just curious.
I feel like I'm technically better in the gi.
I wondered if you were going to answer that.
I honestly, yes.
Andrea's like, I win more in the gi and I want to win. She said that the other day. So maybe we should start doing gi. It lasted 1 week. You did one private in the gi and then you went right back to no gi because you're following your heart.
I don't know. I still want to win, so
You're still torn.
just when I'm in the gi, I try to work hard in the gi. When I'm not, it's more fun, but I just want to win.
Do you feel like you do the same game in both?
I try. I think I try to.
That's interesting because that's actually my problem is I have very different, not very different, but like I play different guards in both.
Well, I don't know if my game complements both gi and no gi.
So it may be to your detriment too.
It may not be great. That may be why I'm better in the gi versus no gi.
Interesting. I don't know. I mean, I think that's a lot of like my no gi guard was built around not having really strong arms. So it makes sense that I think I'm better in no gi for that reason. Whereas like my gi game didn't take that into account. And then when people say just don't grab the gi, like I hate that. I hate when people say that. I
literally tell you that.
It's not that easy when you have that much training in your body.
Yeah.
And when you considered yourself a gi guard player for so long, like it's physically hard not to. And then I'm like, I don't know what to do. And then like, it's also hard to play like my outside position no gi guards in gi. I get stuck in the gi.
So much friction.
I don't want to break my feet or break my toes. And like, I find myself getting caught in belts, getting caught in the gi. And I mean, that
toes
can
end up everywhere.
I mean, because of the way I play, right? I'm going to outside positions. There's a lot of kicking over and or sliding legs over. So it's like almost kind of dangerous. You know, in some ways. I didn't have that issue when I played Spider Lasso, right? Like, I'm not kicking over. Like, I never had that issue. I dislocated a toe one time in 5.5 years of training. And that was when I was training gi. Yeah. And like, it wasn't a common thing. And I'm like, anytime in a gi and I'm trying to do my K guard, I'm constantly getting stuck. I don't know. For me, I do two totally different things. And that's my problem.
Yeah.
Interesting. All right. What do we have coming up? Probably some competitions, but you don't know which ones yet.
Yeah, not sure which ones yet, but we will be at Role Model Women's Only Grappling Camp, and that's in Plainfield, Indiana. And that's July 11th through the 13th. And they are not sold out yet, so you can still get in.
All right. And where can people find us?
People can find the podcast, lezrollradio.com, and at Lez Roll Radio on TikTok, Blue Sky, YouTube, and Instagram. We also have a Discord, and the link is in the bio. You can find me, Andrea Shenegi, at Shenegie, and my wife, Kelly, at Kelly Shenegi on TikTok, Blue Sky, and Instagram.
All right. Thanks.
Bye.